It's almost that time of year again where you can go to the beach, enjoy summer, and I have a perfect recipe for you guys on a very nice summer's day. We're going to be making some beetroot gazpacho. If you've never tried beetroot gazpacho, then you should definitely give this recipe a try, as it's absolutely delicious. And we have more than just one variation of gazpacho here. I have a few other recipes on my YouTube channel as well. So before we get going, be sure to give this video a like if you do happen to like it. And don't forget to hit that bell notification and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. Now, let's get started. Now for the ingredients, we're going to be adding about 250 grams of vine-ripe tomatoes. The riper they are, the better they are because they have more flavor. Half a red bell pepper. Red bell peppers are sweet, so it'll add a little sweetness to the dish. If you add green, they're a little more bitter and it will add a little bitterness to it. We're going to add half an onion, half a clove of garlic, half a cucumber as well that we're going to deseed and peel, and we're also going to make our own croutons. And then of course we're going to be adding some canned beets. If you want to use fresh beets and cook them yourself, then you're more than welcome to. We're going to be using a little olive oil, a little vinagre de Jerez or sherry vinegar as well. You can use balsamic if you don't have sherry vinegar, but it will change the flavor a little bit. And we're also going to be seasoning it with some salt and pepper. Now I'm going to give the tomatoes a quick rinse to wash off all the debris and to take off the little leaves because you don't want that in the gazpacho. And we're going to set up the blender right in front of our cutting board so we can put everything into it as we're cutting. Now for the tomatoes, I'm going to take my little paring knife. I'm going to position my finger over the blade so it doesn't go too far into the tomatoes to deep hit them. This is one way of doing it. You can also cut them in half or into quarters and then just cut off the pits. Either way works, but it does help if you cut the tomatoes a little smaller just to help your blender work a little bit. After the tomatoes are cut, we're going to cut up our red bell pepper. I'm only going to be using half of this today for the gazpacho, and then I'm going to be using the rest for a little bit of garnish. If you're making double the size recipe, use the whole bell pepper, or if your bell pepper is smaller, then use the whole thing. In goes the bell pepper, and we're on to the onion. Going to top and tail it, peel it as well, and I'm just going to cut these into quarters. If it's a little big, cut them a little smaller to help your blender out. And since you're blending up the onion anyway, this could also be a good time to practice your knife skills on how to slice and dice an onion, which I have a video on that, by the way, and I will leave the link in the description down below if you want to learn on how to cut an onion a little easier. Now the cucumber, I'm going to give it a quick peel. I'm going to slice it from top to bottom in half, and I'm also going to deseed it. And anytime that you're cutting a lot of vegetables, it is a good idea to have a little trash can next to you, just so you can put all the garbage into it while you're working instead of having to go to the trash every single time that you need to throw something out. One quick thing, guys, if you want to buy some beets, if you have some at home, you can just boil them, peel them, cut them up, and then blend them. It will take a little bit longer to make this recipe. If you do that, using canned beets is much quicker and easier. But one thing I would suggest is that anytime that you're using red beets, you do not make this recipe when wearing anything that is stainable, especially not wearing white clothes, because if you have any accidents, you know, it's just one of those things. It's better to wear black, it's better to wear another color, red, so that way if you do happen to get some on yourself, well, you're not going to be sitting there for you know how long trying to get that stain out. Just something to think about. And then you want to make sure when you're using a clove of garlic that you don't have a germ already starting to sprout. You don't need to necessarily cut it down the middle all the time and remove the germ, but if you do actually see a little germ growing like I have here in my garlic, it is a good idea to remove it. Some people say that this removes the bite from the garlic, but it doesn't. Making gazpacho is such an easy process because all you do is slice all the vegetables up and then just add everything to the blender, and that's it. Now I'm going to be adding about 2 tablespoons of sherry vinegar, and we're also going to add about 50 milliliters of olive oil. I'm going to eye it on this one because you can add a little more olive oil if you need to. This just helps to, well, it helps to emulsify the gazpacho. A little bit of black pepper, and a little bit of salt. Now, if your blender starts to look like it's a fruit smoothie, then you know that you have the right consistency. It should look like what it does in the video. If your blender is not blending really well, you may have to give it a couple shakes just to help get the ingredients moving. Other than that though, blend it on high for about 40 seconds to a minute, maybe a little longer depending on your blender. If it's still a little too coarse, continue blending. Now after it looks like you have more or less a good consistency, taste it. If it needs a little more salt, add a little more. If it needs a little more vinegar, add a little more to it, or a little more black pepper, because this is the moment to change what you want with the gazpacho. Now, if the gazpacho is not thick enough, some people will also add a little bit of bread to their gazpacho just to thicken it, the sauce. Now, since beetroots stain pretty easily, I would highly suggest to do all of this in the sink. Put the pot in the sink and pour everything in the sink. That way all the mess, if you have one, is in the sink. If you're using a chinois like I am, you can use a ladle to help force the puree through the mesh, and it'll speed up the process a little bit. Now, if you're going to be making a lot of gazpacho, just keep in mind that this is going to take a little bit of time doing this by hand, and you want to try to get as much of the gazpacho out of the chinois as possible. If you notice that the consistency still isn't good enough, you may need to pass this a second time through the sieve. Now for the garnish, I'm just going to slice our little red bell pepper, a little segment. I'm going to take off a little bit of the membrane just to flatten it. And I'm just going to cut little diced pieces of peppers, onions, and cucumber. This is just going to be for the garnish. And if you want to cut the beets for the garnish, I would suggest using a color cutting board that you don't really care to stain as well. It is a good idea to pop your bread into the freezer for a few minutes just to firm up. That way you're not going to tear it, because we want to have little cubes. We don't want torn pieces of bread in our little gazpacho. And if you also have a bread knife, it helps quite a bit as well. Now to cook these little breadcrumbs, I would suggest using either a good saute pan or a non-stick pan. And we're going to add a little bit of olive oil when the pan gets hot. We're going to allow the olive oil to come up to temp, and then we're going to add the little croutons in. We want a nice golden brown color on the croutons. If you notice that they have absorbed all the oil, you can add a little bit more, turn them on each side until they're nicely golden brown. And once you achieve the color that you want with the croutons, you should take a plate, take a little bit of paper towel as well, pour the croutons onto the plate and to the paper towel just to drain off any excess oil. Add a little bit of salt Maldon to the top of the croutons just to give them a little bit of seasoning. Now, one thing I would recommend is that if you're making this for summer or for a little get together, I would also recommend making some sangria to go with it. So you have the sangria, you have the gazpacho, and maybe also a tortilla española, maybe a paella or something else. So I'll leave a few links down below to give you guys a few ideas on what you can do or how you compare this with other things. If you do happen to make this recipe, guys, then be sure to let me know how much you like it down below in the comments. Don't forget to give the video a like as well. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then please do subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content, and hit that bell notification as well so you don't miss out on any future videos. Now until our next video, guys, whether it be a reaction video with Uncle Roger, somebody else, or another recipe, I will see you guys again very soon. Take care.